Hi everybody, this is Anne. When I think about fruit bowls, I picture a typical generic round shape, just bigger so it can hold a lot of fruit. But I recently saw a fruit bowl that didn't fit the generic description at all, as it was a very simple yet contemporary shape. I thought perhaps I could challenge myself to think outside the box and make some unique hand-built fruit bowls. For inspiration, I looked to actual fruit. I sketched out a template in the shape of a banana peel. I rolled out a 1/4-inch slab of clay and ribbed it smooth with my rubber rib. I cut out the template from the slab. I then rolled out a thin, long coil for a border. I placed the slab on a piece of plastic wrap. I wet the coil and attached it along the edge around the entire slab. I used my fingers to seal the coil to the edge. I covered the slab with plastic wrap and flipped it over. I then worked the clay at the seams to seal the coil along that side of the slab. For a mold, I ripped off some tar paper from my tar paper roll. It'll work well for my purposes as it's stiff yet flexible, durable, and waterproof, but most importantly, it'll hold the shape that I need. I placed the slab in the mold. I folded the mold, then shaped the clay, rolling the edges together and shaping the clay just how I wanted. To hold it in place as it dried and shrank, I taped the top of the tar paper in a tubular shape. Then I let it dry slowly. Here it is in the bone-dry state. I really like that organic shape. I painted underglaze lines to accentuate the width of the piece and give it direction. To finish it, I glazed the inside with Amico marigold glaze to mimic the banana, and then white around all the lines on the outside. Now it's ready for a line of fruits or berries. Next, I thought I'd try to create a bowl based on the shape of a fruit slice. I started with a 1/4-inch slab and traced out the fruit slice template. I then rolled out an 1/8 of an inch slab and cut out the arch template. I wet the surface of the slab and attached the arch strip along the curved edge of the slice. I worked the inner edge downward with my finger so it was flush to the bottom slab. I continued working it down with both my fingers and the red rubber rib until it was smooth and the slab became a wedge slice. I centered the last template piece along the front edge and traced lightly the lines onto the slab to complete the design. I made 5 of these slices. I laid a piece of plastic wrap down on the table and began stacking the slices, staggering them as shown. When I was happy with the placement, I scored and slipped each slice in place. For a mold, I'll be using the large styrofoam half sphere. I picked up the plastic and placed the slices down in the bowl. I gently pushed the slices to conform to the round shape. I let it dry slowly inside the mold, and when it was a stiff leather hard, I carved away the lines that I traced to accentuate that citrus feel. Here's one that I made earlier. I like that almost braided-looking pattern that the staggered slices creates. And on the back side, there's a nice woven pattern too. It isn't a deep bowl, but it'll hold fruit and it'll make a nice contemporary centerpiece to a table. To finish, I glazed it with transparent Opulence lemon drop glaze, which has a soft citrus color and breaks well over the texture. The color acts as an almost neutral one, so it'll work well to display many different varieties of fruit. Finally, I thought I'd create a bowl inspired not by fruit, but by the pea pod. I rolled out a coil about 3/4 to 1 inch thick and 8 inches long. I cut off the ends of the coil to get rid of the jagged edges. I wanted to round the ends a little, so I pounced them flat and smooth first, then rolled the edges on the table to start rounding them. As I rolled, I worked the jagged clay edges inward and smooth until I had both edges the way that I wanted them. I then pounced one side of the coil on the table to flatten it a bit. I wanted to hollow it out. I used a round carving tool and shallowly carved down the center length of that flat side of the coil. I kept carving out shallow strips until I got down to about 1/4 inch from the bottom and around the sides. I worked the clay smooth with my fingers on the inside and the rim. I rolled a long skinny coil for the rim. I placed it around the circumference of the rim and trimmed off the excess. I removed the coil from the bowl and connected the ends well. I used a small carving tool to dig out a trench all the way around the top of the coil so it'll fit over the rim easily. I worked the jagged edges down a bit. I wet the rim of the bowl, then worked the coil down over the rim and attached it well. To create the pea pod shape, I held my fingers where I wanted the rim to ripple inward, then began to push the clay between my fingers outward. I then worked more ripples to the clay outside of my fingers. I repeated this on the other side so it was symmetrical. Here's one that I made earlier. The ripples resemble the part of the pea pod where the little peas would be nestled. To finish it, I glazed it with Amico True Celadon glaze on the inside, which is the perfect pea color. I added a pattern of lines to the outside with underglaze and glazed it with my white liner glaze. It's perfect for small fruit, berries, or even nuts or candy. I love that you really don't have to go far for inspiration to make pottery. You may just have to open your refrigerator. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. It also really helps us out if you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.